Arya was a single mother who lived with her little daughter in a small rented apartment. Life was never easy for her because she worked long hours at a local shop and still struggled to pay the bills. She often looked at her daughter sleeping and promised herself that one day things would be better. Arya had no family nearby, and most of her relatives had lost touch with her years ago. She had accepted her simple life, believing nothing extraordinary would ever happen to her. One morning, Arya received a letter with an old family seal on it. The handwriting was elegant, and the paper had turned slightly yellow with time. She opened it carefully and read that she had inherited a property from her late great-uncle, a man she had never met. The letter mentioned that the property was an old mansion located far away from the city, on a piece of land that many people no longer visited. Arya felt surprised and even confused because she had no memory of this man, but the letter clearly stated her name as the heir. At first, she thought this was a mistake. How could someone like her inherit a mansion when she barely managed to pay her rent? Yet curiosity grew inside her. After speaking to a lawyer who confirmed the inheritance was real, she decided to visit the property. Her daughter Mira was excited, thinking it would be like going on an adventure. Arya, on the other hand, felt a strange mix of fear and hope. The journey took several hours. They traveled past villages, fields, and finally into a quiet area where the roads became narrow and trees grew tall on both sides. As they reached the location, Arya saw a massive iron gate standing in the middle of the wild path. It was rusty but still strong, with vines curling around it. She pushed it open with effort, and the sound of creaking metal echoed through the silent air. When they finally saw the mansion, Arya felt a chill in her body. The house was large, with broken windows and faded walls. The roof looked weak in places, and the garden was overgrown with weeds taller than her daughter. Mira squeezed her mother's hand and whispered that it looked scary, but Arya smiled and told her it was just an old house that needed care. Deep down, however, she also felt the weight of the place, as if it carried secrets that had been kept for too long. They stepped inside, and the air smelled of dust and wood that had been left untouched for years. The floorboards creaked under their steps, and cobwebs hung in every corner. Sunlight entered through broken glass, casting long shadows on the walls. Despite its abandoned look, the house had a kind of beauty, like it once held laughter and gatherings. Arya imagined how her great-uncle might have lived here, walking through the same hallways. She wandered from room to room, each one filled with old furniture covered in white sheets. The library had shelves filled with books that smelled of time. The dining hall had a long table, and she could almost picture a family sitting there many years ago. Mira ran around, her small footsteps echoing, and laughed when she discovered a staircase leading upstairs. Though the house looked empty, Arya felt that it was calling to her. Something about it made her believe there was more hidden beneath the dust and silence. She remembered the lawyer's words when he gave her the keys. He had told her that sometimes old houses carried more than just memories. His eyes had lingered on her in a way that suggested he knew something, but did not wish to say. Arya stood by a large window, looking out at the wild garden. She wondered why her great-uncle had left everything to her and not to someone else. What did he want her to find here? She had no answers, only questions that grew stronger with every passing moment. Mira tugged her sleeve and asked if they could stay the night, and though Arya felt nervous, she agreed. She knew this place was now part of her life, whether she wanted it or not. And somewhere inside that rotting house, a secret waited to be uncovered. That evening, Arya prepared a small meal in the dusty old kitchen. The stove still worked, though it was old, and she managed to heat some food she had carried with her. Mira sat at the wooden table and swung her legs, her eyes full of excitement. For her, the mansion felt like a castle waiting to be explored. Arya, however, kept glancing around, feeling that the silence inside the house was louder than the sound of their voices. After dinner, they made a small bed in one of the upstairs rooms. Arya chose the room with the least broken windows, so the night air would not make them too cold. She spread blankets on the floor and kept a lantern beside them. Mira fell asleep quickly. Her small body curled under the covers, but Arya stayed awake, listening to the sounds of the house. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind through the cracks made her heart race. Still, she reminded herself that old houses always made such sounds. The next morning, sunlight entered through the dusty curtains, waking Arya early. She walked through the house with fresh energy, determined to see more of what it held. Mira followed her, still half sleepy but eager. As they explored the second floor, Arya noticed a locked door at the far end of the hallway. Unlike the other rooms, this door looked newer, as if someone had replaced it not long ago. She pulled the handle, but it did not open. Mira tilted her head and asked why only that door was locked. Arya had no answer. She searched the drawers of nearby rooms, hoping to find a key, but none appeared. Something about that door bothered her. Why would one room in an abandoned house be locked so tightly? She decided to leave it for now and focus on the rest of the mansion. They went back downstairs and explored the back part of the house. Behind the kitchen, Arya found a narrow staircase that led to a basement. The air grew cooler as they stepped down, and the smell of damp stone filled their noses. The basement was dark, but her lantern revealed shelves lined with jars, boxes, and old trunks. Mira pointed at a wooden chest with iron corners. It was covered in dust, but it stood out because it was larger than the rest. Arya bent down and opened it. Inside, she found faded clothes, letters tied with ribbons, and photographs of people she did not recognize. One photograph showed a young man standing proudly in front of the same mansion, though it looked new and shining at that time. On the back of the photograph, there was handwriting that said, "To keep safe until the right time." Arya felt a shiver. Who had written these words, and what did they mean? She placed the photo back carefully and looked through the letters. Most of them were unreadable due to age, but a few words stood out, like fortune, hidden, and trust. Arya's heart beat faster. Could her great-uncle have hidden something valuable here? She pushed the thought away, reminding herself not to get carried away, but the idea refused to leave her mind. Later that day, she and Mira cleaned part of the garden. The weeds were thick, but Arya wanted the house to feel less heavy. As she worked, she noticed something odd near the side of the building. The ground had a stone cover that looked different from the rest of the soil. She tried to move it, but it was too heavy. She marked the spot in her mind, telling herself she would return to it when she had more strength. By evening, Arya sat in the library looking at the books. Many of them were about history, old families, and property records. She pulled one book and felt something strange. Behind it, hidden against the shelf, there was a small metal box. It was locked, but it felt important. She held it close, thinking again of the locked room upstairs and the strange stone outside. Everything in this house seemed connected by invisible threads, and she had only started to touch them. Mira walked into the library, yawning, and asked if they could light a candle because the lantern made the room look spooky. Arya smiled, placed the box on the table, and lit a candle. The warm glow softened the heavy atmosphere. She hugged her daughter, thankful for her laughter, because without it the house might have felt too heavy. As the candlelight flickered across the shelves, Arya whispered to herself that she had to know what her great-uncle wanted her to find. Something was waiting for her in this mansion, and it was not just memories. The locked room, the stone in the garden, the hidden box, every clue pulled her deeper into the mystery. And though fear lingered in her heart, curiosity had already taken root. She was ready to discover what secrets the rotting house was holding for her. The next morning, Arya woke with a stronger sense of purpose. The locked room upstairs, the metal box from the library, and the strange stone in the garden had kept her awake most of the night. She felt as if her great-uncle had left pieces of a puzzle, waiting for her to put them together. Mira, cheerful as always, reminded her that adventure was fun only if they kept searching. Her daughter's words gave her courage to move forward. Arya decided to focus on the small metal box she had found behind the book. She placed it on the table and studied it carefully. The lock was tiny but firm, and she did not have the key. She tried shaking the box, and it made a faint sound as if something small but heavy was inside. She searched through the drawers and shelves again, hoping to find a key hidden nearby, but her efforts gave no result. Finally, she placed the box back on the shelf, deciding she would return to it later. She turned her attention to the locked door upstairs. The sight of it still bothered her, and she felt certain that whatever truth the mansion held was connected to that room. She pressed her ear against the door, listening carefully, but only silence answered her. The lock was old but strong, and she had no tools to break it. She sighed and told herself that patience was part of discovery. Mira, standing beside her, suggested they look outside again. The garden was overgrown and wild, but Arya's eyes went straight to the stone she had noticed the day before. It was round and flat, almost like the cover of a well, but there was no handle or sign of what it truly was. She tried again to move it, pressing her hands against the cold surface, but it did not shift. Mira fetched a long stick and tried to help, but even together they could not lift it. Arya felt frustration rise, but also determination. Something about that stone told her it was not just part of the garden. In the afternoon, Arya decided to look deeper into the basement. She carried a stronger lantern this time and guided Mira carefully down the narrow stairs. The basement smelled of earth and age, but the shelves and trunks still held many things that had not been touched for years. She returned to the wooden chest and picked up more letters, searching through the faded ink. Most words were lost to time, but in one letter she could clearly read the sentence, "The fortune must stay hidden until trust is proven." Arya repeated the words softly. They gave her a strange sense of responsibility, as if her great-uncle had written them directly for her. She wondered what kind of fortune he had meant, money, land, or something else entirely. She folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the chest. While searching further, Mira called her over to another trunk. Inside, beneath layers of fabric, they found a small wooden box with carvings on the lid. The design was unusual, shaped like vines twisting around a circle. Arya opened it, and inside lay a collection of old keys. Each key was different in size and style, some thin and delicate, others large and heavy. Her heart quickened. Perhaps one of these belonged to the locked room upstairs or the small metal box. They carried the keys upstairs, and Arya tried them one by one on the metal box in the library. Most of them did not fit, but finally one thin silver key slipped smoothly into the lock. With a click, the box opened. Inside was a folded piece of parchment and a small golden coin. The coin shone even in the dim light, and Arya knew instantly it was valuable. The parchment, however, was even more curious. It contained a drawing of the mansion, with several rooms marked by small symbols. One of the symbols was clearly placed over the locked room upstairs, and another was drawn in the garden near the stone cover. Arya's hands trembled slightly as she showed Mira the map. It was no longer a question of whether the house held secrets. It was now a matter of following the clues. She realized her great-uncle had not only left her the mansion, but also a path to something hidden within it. Mira smiled with excitement, declaring that the adventure was becoming real. Arya hugged her daughter, grateful for her courage and joy. She looked once more at the map and whispered to herself that the truth was waiting. The locked door and the heavy stone outside were no longer mysteries she could ignore. They were invitations, guiding her deeper into the secrets of the rotting house. Arya could not stop thinking about the map she had found inside the small metal box. The marked symbols seemed to whisper to her, pointing the way toward something her great-uncle wanted her to discover. She laid the parchment flat on the library table and studied every line of the drawing. The locked room upstairs and the stone in the garden were clearly shown, with circles drawn around them. It was as if they were both doors to something greater. The following morning, she gathered her courage and carried the set of keys upstairs. Mira followed closely, her eyes wide with excitement. The hallway felt colder than usual as they stood in front of the locked door. Arya tried one key after another, her hand slightly shaking until finally a heavy brass key slid into the lock. With a slow turn, the sound of metal clicked, and the door creaked open. Inside, dust swirled in the air as sunlight pushed through the curtains. The room was large, with high shelves, an old desk, and a tall cabinet pressed against the wall. Unlike the other rooms in the mansion, this one seemed carefully preserved. The furniture was strong. The curtains, though faded, were still in place, and the air smelled less of abandonment. It felt as if someone had locked the room to protect it rather than to leave it behind. Mira ran to the desk first, opening drawers and finding bundles of papers tied with string. Most of them were records of the estate, but among them lay a leather-bound journal. Arya picked it up, brushing away the dust. She opened the first page and saw her great-uncle's handwriting. The words were neat, and the ink, though old, was still clear. The journal spoke of his fears and his dreams. He wrote about people who once visited him, people who wished to take the fortune he guarded. He wrote that he trusted no one, not even distant relatives, except for someone who would prove they carried honesty in their heart. Arya read the words slowly, feeling her chest tighten. Why had he chosen her? Did he believe she was the one who would understand his reasons? At the end of the journal, one page carried a riddle. It said, 2 doors to one truth, one in the soil and one in the wood. Choose with care, for both lead to the treasure of trust. Arya whispered the words again and again, trying to understand. Clearly, the wooden door was the very one she had just opened. The soil must mean the stone in the garden. Both seemed important, and the map confirmed it. She searched the tall cabinet next, and behind a stack of books she found a small wooden box similar to the one in the basement. Inside were more golden coins and another folded paper. This paper had a sketch of the garden, showing the stone circle and beneath it the drawing of a staircase. Arya's heart raced. There was something hidden under that stone, perhaps an underground passage. Mira looked at the coins with wonder, but Arya quickly covered them again. She knew they were valuable, but she also knew they were only part of a much bigger secret. She closed the box and placed it in her bag for safety. She felt as if every discovery tied her closer to her great-uncle's plan. That afternoon, Arya and Mira returned to the garden. The stone cover lay silent in its place, waiting. Arya studied the map again, then the stone, and knew she had to move it. She tried with all her strength, but the stone refused to shift. Sweat covered her forehead and frustration filled her heart. Mira, though young, suggested they use a lever. Arya looked at her daughter with pride, realizing how clever she was. Together they found a thick wooden beam in the storage shed beside the house. Arya wedged it beneath the edge of the stone, pressing down with all her weight. The stone moved slightly, groaning against the soil. Mira cheered and Arya pushed harder. At last, with one strong effort, the stone tilted enough to reveal a dark opening beneath. Cold air rushed out, carrying the scent of earth that had not been touched for years. Arya held Mira's hand tightly as they peered inside. A narrow staircase led down into the ground, its steps made of stone and covered in dust. The darkness looked endless, yet the map and the journal's riddle had brought her here for a reason. She lit a lantern and looked at her daughter. Mira smiled bravely, ready for the next step. Arya knew the journey into the underground passage would not be easy, but she also knew it was the only way forward. With the lantern held high, she whispered a silent promise to her great-uncle. She would uncover the truth he had hidden, no matter how deep the house tried to bury it. Arya stood at the edge of the opening with the lantern glowing in her hand. The air rising from the dark staircase felt cool and damp, as if it had been sealed for generations. Mira squeezed her mother's hand tightly, her eyes wide with both fear and excitement. Arya gave her a reassuring smile and said they would go carefully, step by step. They began to descend, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone steps. The deeper they went, the stronger the smell of earth became. The narrow walls around them were rough, and Arya brushed her hand against them to steady herself. The lantern's light created long shadows that danced around, making the place look both mysterious and magical. At the bottom of the staircase, they entered a long tunnel. The ceiling was low and the ground was uneven. Old wooden beams supported the passage, though some looked fragile with age. Arya guided Mira slowly, careful not to let her stumble. After walking for some time, they reached a wooden door set into the stone wall. Unlike the locked room upstairs, this door had no lock. Arya pushed it open, and the lantern revealed a chamber filled with old chests and boxes. Mira gasped with delight, running forward to peek at the dusty trunks. Arya joined her and lifted the lid of one. Inside were old documents, letters, and ledgers, each carefully stored as if someone had wanted them preserved for the future. She pulled out a bundle and saw records of business deals, land purchases, and banknotes. It seemed her great-uncle had hidden not only valuables but also proof of his wealth and the history of his estate. In another trunk, they discovered silver dishes, candlesticks, and jewelry wrapped in cloth. Mira's eyes sparkled at the sight, but Arya kept her calm. She knew these treasures were worth more than she could imagine, but she also knew there was still more to uncover. The map had marked this place, but it also hinted at something deeper. As they explored further, Arya noticed a stone wall at the back of the chamber. It looked slightly different from the rest, as if it had been rebuilt at some point. She moved closer and tapped the stones lightly. The sound was hollow. Her heart raced as she realized there might be another space hidden behind it. She looked around the chamber and found an iron rod lying in the corner. With effort, she began to push at the stones. The wall resisted at first, but slowly, with Mira's help, she managed to loosen one of the stones. It fell to the ground, and behind it was a dark gap. Arya widened the opening until it was large enough for them to pass through. She raised the lantern and peered inside. Beyond the wall was a smaller room, and in the middle of it stood a chest larger than any they had seen before. Its wood was carved with intricate designs and iron bands wrapped tightly around it. A heavy lock secured the front, though age had covered it in rust. Arya's hands trembled slightly as she approached it. She reached into her bag and pulled out the ring of keys they had found earlier. One by one, she tried them in the lock. At last, a thick iron key turned smoothly and the chest opened with a creak. Inside, piles of golden coins shone brightly under the lantern's light. Jewels, rings, and necklaces sparkled as if waiting to be found. Mira gasped in wonder, her little hands clapping together. Arya stared in silence, overwhelmed by the sight. The treasure was far beyond anything she had ever dreamed. But among the glittering wealth, Arya noticed a sealed envelope placed carefully on top. She picked it up and saw her name written on it in her great-uncle's handwriting. Her chest tightened as she opened it. The letter inside spoke directly to her. It said that he had chosen her because she was known for her honesty and strength, even though she lived with struggles. He wanted her to have the fortune not for greed, but for building a future filled with kindness and care. Arya's eyes grew moist as she read his words. She understood now that the wealth was not just money, it was a gift of trust, a chance to change her life and Mira's life forever. She hugged her daughter tightly, whispering that their world had just been transformed. The lantern light flickered over the chest of gold, casting a warm glow. For the first time since entering the rotting house, Arya felt no fear. She felt only gratitude, as if her great-uncle's spirit was watching, proud of the choice he had made. After discovering the hidden treasure, Arya and Mira carefully carried some of the golden coins and jewelry back to the surface. The mansion no longer felt dark or heavy to Arya. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow now seemed like a part of the story she was living. She knew the house had tested her patience and courage, but it had rewarded her in ways she never imagined. They placed the treasure in one of the upstairs rooms, locking it carefully. Arya realized that before she made any decisions about the fortune, she needed to understand everything her great-uncle had left behind. She returned to the journal, rereading passages about trust, patience, and wisdom. Each sentence felt personal, as if he had written it specifically for her. Mira sat beside her, listening to her mother read aloud and asking questions about the words she didn't understand. Arya smiled at her curiosity, grateful for her presence. The next few days were spent exploring the mansion more thoroughly. Arya examined each room carefully, cleaning and organizing where she could. She found old furniture that could be repaired, paintings that had faded but were still beautiful, and shelves filled with books that held stories from decades past. Mira loved the library most, spending hours flipping through pages of tales and illustrations, imagining the people who had read them before. One afternoon, while dusting in the main hall, Arya noticed that one of the floorboards seemed slightly loose. She pried it up gently and discovered a small compartment beneath it. Inside was a bundle of letters tied with ribbon. These letters were written to her great-uncle from various people, all talking about trust, honesty, and family matters. One letter mentioned a bank account that had been set aside long ago, waiting for the rightful heir to claim it. Arya felt amazed at how much planning her great-uncle had done, protecting his fortune until it reached the right hands. Mira, ever curious, explored the garden while her mother worked. She pulled weeds, arranged flowers, and even found a few stones shaped like steps leading to the stone cover they had opened before. Mira's laughter and energy filled the mansion, making it feel alive again. Arya watched her daughter play and realized that this house, once abandoned and lonely, was now full of hope and life. One evening, as the sun set and painted the sky with shades of gold and pink, Arya sat on the porch steps and reflected. She realized that the treasure was not only about wealth, it was also about the lessons her great-uncle had left behind. Patience, courage, and honesty had brought her to this moment. She thought about her struggles, her work, and the small victories she had achieved in life. Now all of that effort felt meaningful, as if it had led her here to uncover both fortune and wisdom. That night, Arya and Mira sat in the library, organizing their findings. The mansion felt like a home now, with warmth and light in every corner. She had decided to use part of the treasure to repair the house and garden, making it a safe and beautiful place for herself and Mira. The rest of the fortune she planned to use wisely, to secure their future and to help those in need. Her great-uncle's gift was not just money. It was a responsibility, and Arya felt ready to embrace it. As Mira drifted to sleep, Arya stood by the window, looking out at the mansion and the garden bathed in moonlight. She felt a quiet joy, knowing that this house, once rotting and abandoned, was now a place of hope. The hidden passages, the locked doors, and the secret treasures were all part of a story that she and Mira would continue to live. Arya whispered a quiet thank you to her great-uncle, feeling as if he was there beside her, proud of what she had discovered and the choices she would make. She knew life would never be the same again, but it would be full of possibility, adventure, and happiness. For the first time in years, she felt that her future was truly in her hands. The following morning, Arya woke with a sense of determination. She had spent days exploring the mansion and its hidden treasures, but she felt there was still more to discover. The map from the small metal box, the journal, and the letters suggested that her great-uncle had planned everything carefully. She wanted to understand every detail before deciding what to do with the fortune. Mira, full of energy as always, ran to the library and picked out a few old books. Arya smiled at her daughter, appreciating how curious and brave she had been throughout this adventure. They had grown closer in the mansion than they had ever been before, sharing every discovery and every small thrill. The house, once lonely and quiet, now felt alive with their laughter and activity. Arya decided to explore the upstairs rooms that she had not yet examined thoroughly. Most of them contained old furniture and belongings, but in one room she noticed something unusual. Behind a tall wardrobe, there was a faint outline of another small door. She tried the handle, but it was locked. Arya felt a familiar thrill of curiosity. Her great-uncle had hidden yet another secret. She placed it in her mind to search for a key later, feeling a mix of excitement and patience. Downstairs, she returned to the chest filled with gold and coins. The treasure glimmered under the light, but Arya was more interested in the letters and maps she had collected. She spread them on the table and began connecting the symbols from the map to the locations in the mansion and garden. It was becoming clear that her great-uncle had hidden smaller treasures and clues throughout the property, each one testing patience and courage. Mira ran to her mother with a small envelope she had found tucked in a pile of letters. Inside were sketches and notes about the mansion's construction, showing hidden compartments and secret spaces. Arya realized that her great-uncle had anticipated that someone like her would need guidance to uncover all the secrets. He had prepared a careful trail for her to follow. Later, Arya decided to revisit the stone cover in the garden. She looked at the underground passage with a new understanding and a calm confidence. The lantern light revealed the stairs leading down, and she remembered how they had discovered the treasure below. It had been a test of courage, trust, and intelligence, and they had succeeded. Now she wondered what the next challenge might be, hidden behind the small door upstairs or perhaps in another part of the mansion. As they explored, Arya began planning how to restore the mansion. Some rooms needed repair and the garden had to be cleaned and cared for. She wanted the house to feel warm and welcoming, not just for her and Mira, but for the future. She thought about inviting neighbors or friends, and perhaps creating a place where stories and laughter could fill the halls again. That evening, as the sun began to set, Arya and Mira sat together on the porch. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the scent of flowers and grass. Mira asked questions about the gold, the letters, and the secret rooms, and Arya answered as best she could, careful to keep the details appropriate for her young daughter.
They laughed and imagined how life in the mansion must have been many years ago. Arya felt a deep sense of pride and fulfillment.
She had uncovered the secrets her great-uncle had left behind, proving her courage and honesty. But she also understood that the real treasure was not just the gold or the coins. It was the wisdom he had passed to her, the lessons of patience, trust, and care. She hugged Mira tightly, knowing that together they could face anything the world might bring. As night fell, the mansion glowed softly in the moonlight. Arya looked out over the garden, the stone cover, and the open windows of the rooms she had explored. The house, once forgotten and rotting, now felt full of life, hope, and possibility. She whispered a quiet promise to herself that she would honor her great-uncle's legacy, not just through the treasure, but through the choices she made and the home she created for herself and Mira. For the first time in years, Arya felt that she was truly free, not just from struggle, but free to live a life full of adventure, care, and joy. The mansion had become their home, and with it, a place where dreams could grow. The next morning, Arya woke with a sense of calm and purpose. The mansion, once quiet and abandoned, now felt like a home filled with possibilities. Mira was already up, exploring the rooms they had restored and checking on the garden. Arya smiled, proud of how brave and curious her daughter had been throughout their adventure. Together they had discovered secrets, treasures and lessons that would stay with them forever. Arya decided it was time to explore the small door she had noticed behind the wardrobe upstairs. She took the bundle of keys and tried each one carefully. After a few attempts, one key turned smoothly and the door creaked open. Inside was a tiny room, simple but cozy. The walls were lined with shelves holding books, papers, and a few small boxes. The air smelled faintly of herbs and wood polish. It seemed her great-uncle had created this space for quiet thought, a personal corner of the mansion where he could write and plan in peace. On the desk, she found a small notebook. Inside were notes about his life, the mansion, and the treasures he had hidden. He had written that he hoped the person who discovered them would be honest, kind, and wise enough to use the fortune for good. Arya felt a deep connection to him through the words. She understood that the wealth was not just gold or coins, but a chance to build a life filled with meaning, care, and trust. Mira sat beside her, listening as Arya read the notes aloud. She asked questions about the mansion and the treasure, and Arya answered with stories about her great-uncle's planning and foresight. They laughed together, imagining the clever tricks he had used to hide the secrets and guide them toward discovery. The mansion no longer felt intimidating. It felt like a storybook waiting to be lived. After exploring the small room, Arya went back to the garden. The stone cover that had led to the underground treasure now seemed like an old friend. She thought about how much courage it had taken to move it and discover the hidden chamber. Everything in the mansion, the locked rooms, hidden boxes, and secret passages, had tested her patience, honesty, and determination. She realized that these tests had prepared her to handle the fortune wisely and thoughtfully. Over the next few days, Arya and Mira worked to make the mansion livable. They cleaned the rooms, repaired broken furniture, and tidied the garden. Arya even planted flowers that Mira chose herself, brightening the paths and corners of the property. The mansion transformed from a rotting, abandoned house into a warm, welcoming home. Every step of the restoration brought a sense of accomplishment and hope. One afternoon, Arya sat in the library, writing a plan for their future. She wanted to use the treasure responsibly, investing in education for Mira, restoring the mansion fully, and helping neighbors and friends in small, meaningful ways. She understood that wealth was more than comfort. It was an opportunity to create goodness and happiness in life. Mira played nearby, her laughter echoing through the halls. Arya watched her daughter and felt a deep sense of gratitude. That evening, as the sun set and the sky turned soft shades of orange and pink, Arya and Mira sat on the porch, holding hands. The mansion glowed in the fading light, a symbol of their journey, courage, and discovery. Arya whispered a silent thank you to her great-uncle for trusting her and leaving her the keys to both the treasure and the lessons he valued most. She felt proud, confident, and ready to face whatever came next. Mira leaned her head on Arya's shoulder, and Arya realized that the real treasure was not the gold or coins. It was the love they shared, the lessons learned, and the home they had built together. The mansion, once rotting and abandoned, had become a place of hope, happiness, and opportunity. Arya knew that she had uncovered not just her great-uncle's fortune, but her own strength and wisdom. As night fell, stars sparkled above the mansion. Arya looked at the peaceful house and garden and smiled. She knew that their adventure had ended, but their life was just beginning. Together, she and Mira would write the next chapters, filled with love, courage, and happiness. The mansion had given them a new beginning, and Arya was determined to make it a life full of promise.